All right, well, let's get started, everyone. It's a little past 7:30. We appreciate everybody joining us. We've got all five candidates for this session here, and we've got some state central committee members and also others from the public were invited, Republicans or other interested parties. This is a forum for the candidates for Utah State Treasurer. The race will be decided Saturday morning with three nominees being sent to Governor Cox for the final selection to replace the Treasurer Dave Damshin, who'd resigned. And so we're excited to have these candidates and to get to know them. We always like to start with a prayer because our PAC recognizes the importance of honoring God. And so I'm going to offer a short prayer and then we'll get started with the program. Father in heaven, we bow our heads and come together as friends and fellow Republicans and citizens here in Utah. We're grateful to be able to be part of this community, to serve and to be served by those who volunteer and those who serve in public office. We're grateful for these candidates, the time they've put in to get to know us and to put themselves forward. We're grateful for the Central Committee members and for all who are part of the Republican team. We ask that we can be humble and learn and be guided tonight, and that we'll have a good spirit and an understanding to make good decisions. We give thanks for our great state, for the beauty of this earth that thou hast given us, and for the health and the joy that we have in this life. We pray now this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Larry Myers. I'm the executive director of the Platform Republicans PAC. The group is hosting tonight. Just the 30-second introduction to us. We are a Utah PAC that raises money for legislative candidates who firmly support the Utah Republican platform. And so we like to help get the word out on candidates. In this case, it's a statewide race, which we don't endorse in. So we're neutral in this race. And that allows us to host a forum like this so that everybody can get to know the candidates and give them a chance to be heard. So again, welcome everyone, and we appreciate the PAC board and those who've helped put this together tonight. We're going to start off with opening statements from each of the candidates, and we'll go in the order that I mentioned. We'll have each of them have 3 minutes. This is their time to tell us about themselves and why they're running. And then after the opening statements, 3 minutes each, we'll go to question and answer. We'll start with some questions from some of our board members from the PAC, and then we'll go to audience questions. And so each of the questions, once we get to those, we'll try to do 1 minute each. I know that's sometimes hard. Some of the other candidates earlier had a hard time with 1 minute, just because sometimes you got a lot to say on a question. But I'm pretty flexible. I haven't yelled at anybody yet. So if you need to go a little over, that's all right. So let's start with Cleon Butterfield. Welcome, Cleon. You've got 3 minutes to introduce yourself.
Well, thank you, Larry. And it's a pleasure for me to be with you tonight. Can everyone hear? Larry, can you hear me okay? Great.
Yep, and don't be afraid to speak up a little bit, but we can hear you.
Okay, well, I just would like to first start with just a thank you to all that have joined. And I'm grateful for the work that each of you do, particularly those on the Central Committee. I know it takes time, it takes effort, and being involved in government is what it's all about in terms of making government better for the citizens here in Utah and actually across the nation. So, and I'm grateful for technology. Boy, we've learned a lot in the last 12 years, haven't we? I mean, 12 months or a year and a half or however long it's been. But the technology of Zoom, being able to get together in this format, I think is great. But to tell you the truth, I'm looking forward to Saturday and hoping to meet many of you in person and getting a chance to introduce myself even a little bit more. And hopefully you know a little bit about me and about all the rest of the candidates in that we have so many, but we've been sending out emails and I've got a website up and hopefully you've seen some of that. But let me just start introducing myself from a standpoint of who I am. I'm a father of 6, raised in the little town of Harriman that has turned into a big town that I get lost in when I go back. But I was raised on a 120-acre farm and able to to work with my mainly father and brothers, but my family. And the point about that is that's where I learned conservative values. And I think maybe I have a very similar story with many of you, whether it's urban or rural, having a heritage of who we are and what we stand for. And I'm so grateful for those experiences in terms of affording me an opportunity to learn how to be independent and stand on my own and work hard and to be rewarded, hopefully in different ways for the work that you do. I'm proud and happy to have an education. I graduated from Brigham Young University with a bachelor's degree in accounting. I have a CPA license. I've been at the Utah Housing Corporation for over 4 decades, which is a long time, but I've been the chief financial officer there for the last 20 years. And so I'll tell you a little more about Utah Housing if I have time, because it does fit into the experience that I think are very valuable and useful for the state treasurer. But I just kind of wanted to continue maybe just a little bit in terms of family life. I think I mentioned that from Harriman, I've raised my family for the last 29 years in Bountiful, so in Davis County. And that was an opportunity for us to get a little closer, reduce the commute as I worked downtown, and to have an opportunity to kind of shift gears from a rural atmosphere to urban atmosphere. And that's what's wonderful about the state of Utah is we have all this wonderful landscape, wonderful neighborhoods, beautiful people. And I think if as I start talking, I think you probably, if you don't know me, you know many like me. And so I'm just happy to have an opportunity to reach out and maybe give back to the community, which is why I'm running for treasurer. I want to give back to the citizens of Utah, particularly the taxpayers, by doing something that I know how to do. And I actually, through experience and through professional abilities and skills, I actually have a lot of the skills that are the core functions of the state treasurer. And so that's one of the reasons I want to serve, is because I think I would be be able to add value and do things for the citizens that needs to be done in that job. One of the things I think that we need in the state treasurer's office is someone who's accountable to the people. That's so important. And I think that's exactly why our beautiful system of government is set up the way it is, and that the treasurer is elected, but accountable to the people. I think he needs to have an independent voice, that he's able to speak on behalf of the taxpayers. I think he needs to be transparent, not only in his leadership, but in his know-how and what he does. People know me, they trust me, they know what I'm doing. Transparency in leadership, transparency in government, in our elected officials is so important, because it's how we are gauged the job that we do. And sometimes you can be doing a great job, but if you're not transparent, people don't know exactly what you're doing. So I think that's important in treasurer's office. And most important is to know the individual. I think to trust them, to have confidence in them, so that they have the ability to not only perform their functions, but to do it in a way that really benefits the state. Financial decisions a lot of times can be very, I'm going to say apolitical, but I think it's important that the treasurer is, and not that I'm a politician, but I think it's important that treasurers have conservative values. And I think if you're looking at political platforms like the Republican platform, so important to understand the platform, to represent the platform. That's who I am, that's who I've been, and that's who I'll always be. I think it's important for the treasurer to also, in an independent voice, have an opportunity to help the other leaders, whether it's legislators or whether it's the executive branch, of which the treasurer is one, or whether it's just the citizens in general, to be able to give financial guidance. every decision that we make have consequences, and particularly long-term consequences. And so that's why I'm running, because I think that's what I'm good at. That's what I do. I'm running as a chief financial officer because that's my skill, my professional abilities, and as the treasurer.
Leon, I apologize, let me jump in because we are at the 3-minute point and then a little
sorry.
more.
I should have been watching my watch.
And I should have
Thank
warned you, if you look at Brad Green, and this is for all the candidates,
Okay.
Brad Green with the wonderful beard there, he's got a little timer in the background.
Oh,
You can keep an eye on
perfect. And
that.
he's waving at me and I'm paying no attention.
I should have said that earlier.
No, but thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for that introduction. And we welcome you. And our next candidate to introduce himself will be Chip Dawson. So Chip, let me pass it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Larry. Can everybody hear me okay? All right, great. I had to steal my son's video game headset. He's very unhappy with me at the moment, but he'll live. I'm Chip Dawson. I moved to Utah about 15 years ago, and since that time, since 2006, my wife and I have made Utah our home, and we love it here. We raised 4 children here, and I've worked for the city of South Jordan since 2006. For 9 years, I spent tracking all the legislative affairs at the federal, state, and county level. And so I'm very familiar, including 9 years up at the state legislature, very familiar with the political processes and the things that go on up the Capitol Hill. I am running because I love public service. My grandfather served in the Coast Guard. My grandmother received the highest civilian award at the Pentagon after 40 years of service. My parents were involved in local and community activities and local community politics. And so I think I kind of inherited a legacy of service that not only requires me to give something back, but really energized my desire to serve in that capacity. Since 2017, I've been the appointed city treasurer for the city of South Jordan. I manage approximately $130 million in cash and investments for the city. I'm an advanced certified public funds investment manager, which means that I'm trained on public and institution investment management. And that's something, it's a skill I think that I could bring to the treasurer's office that would be very advantageous in managing those investments. I'm a certified public finance administrator. I have a master's degree in public administration from SUU, go T-Birds, and a bachelor's degree in business administration from San Jose State University. I love being a treasurer. And the reason is because I love being able to reach people and talk to people and demystify it. A lot of government finance is really like plumbing. You've got a pipe here that comes in, that's our taxes. And then you've got this pipe here and you've got all these little spigots that have to be fed. And then you've got this finally this pool at the end, and that's treasury. And so treasurers have to remember that we control the pool on the end and not the nozzles here and not the source of the flow. And so when you get the chance to explain that to people, I love seeing their eyes light up and really come to an understanding of what our state treasurers do and how they help protect our state in times of financial need. One of the things I think that makes me a very unique candidate, I'm the only candidate that's ever worked for a government entity that has a AAA rating, much like our state of Utah. The city of South Jordan has a AAA credit rating. I've been a part of that team that's helped make that possible. And so I think that that experience is something that makes me a very qualified candidate. And I'm really looking forward to hearing your questions and hope that I can help you understand the role of the treasurer's office a little bit better tonight.
All right, thank you, Chip. That was almost perfect on the timing there, so well done. Next, we welcome Marlo Oaks. Marlo was in St. George and visited with us a couple weeks ago. Good to see you again, Marlo.
Thank you, Larry.
Have you introduce yourself?
Great, thank you. Yeah, my name is Marlo Oaks, and I am originally from Utah, born and raised here, and have lived the last 17 years in Bountiful, or as some of us say, the land of Bountiful. And happy to be here and excited about this treasurer's race. I went to BYU and got an undergrad in economics, and then my first job out of school was in Hong Kong at a commercial bank there, and then decided that I wanted to get in on the buy side of the business. So if you think about the investment world, you have two sides of a coin. One side is the buy side or investment management, and the other side is investment banking, the sell side. So I started out on the sell side and wanted to get in on the buy side, and so was fortunate to find an opportunity at Farmers Insurance in Los Angeles. We lived there for 8 years, and I helped oversee 24 billion in assets by the time I left. 15 years later, we actually, in the middle, after 8 years, we moved to Bountiful, and I kept my job in Los Angeles, and I commuted every week for 7 years. And Southwest Airlines loved me, so I knew it was time to stop doing that as quickly as I could when they started sending me greeting cards and other little things. I then worked at Intermountain Healthcare, helped oversee their $7.5 billion in assets, and for the last 7 years have been working in investment banking. So the reason that I am running is that the treasurer's role fits very well with my background and experience in combining the investment management, the investment banking, and the people skills that I love to get out and see people and meet people. So by tomorrow night, I will have gone to 25 counties and met with people across the state. It's been a wonderful opportunity, which I've really enjoyed. And I think that's one thing that David Damshin did really well was attend a lot of the functions across the state and developed really strong relationships with folks. And I'm committed to doing that as well. So I see the treasurer's role as fundamentally about investment management and investment banking. 8 of the boards that the treasurer sits on are related to investment management. 7 of them are related to investment banking through the debt issuance. And so that combination, I think, is very important that the next treasurer have that kind of background. So with that, I will end.
All right, Marlo, thank you. Welcome. Next up, we've got Susan, and it looks like you got the name changed. So
Yes.
welcome, Susan Speirs. We give you some time to introduce yourself.
Great, thank you, and thank you for hosting us tonight. This has been a great journey. My name's Susan Speirs. I'm a CPA, been in the accounting profession for 30 plus years. Started out in public practice, have grown several businesses, sold several businesses, and certainly prepared tax returns and financed and succession planned several businesses. Accounting is the language of business, and we marry the accounting function and the finance function together. And as I've worked with financial advisors over the years and been able to be on the buy side and the sell side, we've been able to do some fabulous things. I practice mostly in construction and real estate. And as I practiced in those arenas, that's when I got involved with the legislative process. As early on in my career, I've always been maybe a closet politician, if you will. I've always been interested and been active in the political process. Was able to help push legislation that would clean up some of our lien laws, so that as we had contractors that weren't paying for bills and homeowners being billed twice and liened, we could make that right. Moving on, 2003, worked on the national side with Comptroller David Walker with some of the challenges that we're having with consumer debt, consumer financial literacy, which also segued into working with our state legislature with financial literacy and the requirement that our students now have with the half credit in our schools. That moved on to, as I moved into becoming the CEO of the Utah Association of CPAs, I've been there for about 8 years. Tax reform's been pretty big on our mind. We've been very active. I've been up on the Hill several times, maybe too many times. I've probably worn out a few pairs of shoes, fighting tax reform as I understand it from the consumer side, the taxpayer side, as well as the legislative side. So I understand both sides of that process and appreciate the separation of powers between each of the 3 branches of government. But it's given me the opportunity to help negotiate what some of this looks like, but more importantly, especially with the last 2 packages that tried to be passed, to sync those as we're able to involve our taxpayers, but also talk from a policy standpoint and what these burdens do to our taxpayers. So I've been pretty active that way. I continue to be active, work with federal delegations. We were very instrumental with some of the things that were going on early on in the pandemic. Continue to plan to stay that way. And so I'm excited to run for this and serve the Utah people.
All right, thank you, Susan. Appreciate you introducing yourself and being here. And our final panelist, candidate, is Seth Sunderland. Seth, welcome. You're up.
All right. Well, thank you, Larry, and thank you to the board members who set this event up. I think it's great, and I think it's important to be able to have these types of events, so really appreciate it. But grateful for the time. In terms of my background, I was born and raised in Lehigh, back when there was just one small high school, and our sole claim to fame was Footloose was filmed there. Very different now. My grandpa had a farm there that we grew up next to, so got to help him on that. It's all been paved over now, and now they call it Silicon Slopes. So that's been interesting to see. And my grandpa always said, growth, you can't stop growth, but it needs to be managed. And I think that's what Utah's been doing, and I'm excited to see the growth here. In terms of my background, I went to BYU, majored in accounting, and then worked for a year as a forensic auditor at PricewaterhouseCoopers. And no offense to the accountants out there, but I wanted to do something a little bit more dynamic. And so I ended up joining UBS Investment Bank, which is one of the largest investment banks in the world. And so I worked 7 years in San Francisco and then 7 years in Hong Kong. And in Hong Kong, I was one of our senior merger and acquisition leaders for the Asia region, and it ended up leading our Southeast Asia merger and acquisition practice. And so what does a merger and acquisition banker do? Well, we advise clients from startups to large multi-billion-dollar companies on joint ventures, minority investments, mergers, acquisitions, and help them not only analyze the transactions and evaluate them and find the transactions, but actually help structure and negotiate them. And so I've built up quite an extensive skill set just in terms of valuing investments, helping analyze investments, but also from a negotiation standpoint. And I've talked to some of you about this. I've dealt with a lot of different personalities. I spent a lot of time with boards, with big personalities, big opinions, and been able to build relationships that are helpful in terms of guiding people to good outcomes. And so I think that will serve me well. Wanted to move our kids back to Utah so we could raise them as Utahns. And so I guess much like Marlo, ended up splitting my time between Utah and Hong Kong for a while. And yeah, that's a brutal trip between Salt Lake and Hong Kong, but I did it I did it about 20 times a year, 20 to 24 times a year for 2.5 years, but eventually decided to relocate fully here. The writing was on the wall in Hong Kong, and it's changed a lot. And I've talked to some of you about that. And so it was good to be back in Utah. And I believe in what we're doing here in Utah. And I've been involved in different aspects. I've been a state delegate. When I was 19, I was a state delegate for the first time, and I believe in the process. And I think that the aspect here that's important is it's an investment management function and an investment banking function that the Treasury Office does. But there's also a political aspect to it. And that's part of what I believe in as well, is making sure that it's an independent voice and that we're taking care of helping build the Republican Party and help the grassroots and help the county parties grow and make sure we stay centered on conservative values. And so that's going to be an important point for me as state treasurer.
All right, great introductions. Thank you each for being here and for reaching out. I've had a chance to talk to nearly all the candidates personally, and I know you've all been working hard to contact the Central Committee members. So this is our one big chance to see you all in action together. So now's the time you're going to get some dynamic question asking and get a chance to perform on your toes on short notice. So the way we're going to go is if any of our PAC board members want to ask a question, we'll take them, and then we'll go to the audience after that. Just so everyone knows, the Platform Republicans, our board consists of very experienced Republicans from across the state. Many have served in the party offices, both on the state, the county level. We have a lot of SCC members, and we also have people who've run for office and who've worked on campaigns. So we have some great experience among our board members. So we appreciate the service they give. We're all volunteers trying to help out our platform cause. So Bob McEntee from Weber County, you had your hand up first. Bob's a great contributor to our board. Why don't you go ahead with your question?
Okay, thank you, Larry, and thank you all the treasurer candidates for joining us tonight. I just put my question in the chat, but I'll say it out loud for you. And please don't Google search it, okay? Honor system. But there is one of the 50 states has a state-run bank that is not part of the Federal Reserve System. So the deposits are not FDIC insured, but the bank also can kind of make up its own rules. So it is able to give out loans at very low rates, specifically in this state to farmers. So I'd like to know, does anyone know what state that is? But either way, please comment on that idea of having a state-run bank that could give, low-cost loans to businesses and really whoever it wanted to. Thank you. I have a second similar question, but I'll hold off until see if we have time later.
A very interesting question to kick us off. I'm going to rotate the order. So this time we'll go in the order of Chip, Marlo, Susan, Seth, and end with Cleon. And so I guess, Chip, you get to answer the quiz first.
Okay.
I'll start with you.
Yeah, it's a really interesting concept. Thank you for the question. I'm not familiar with the state that has its own state-run bank. I have to tell you, I love the concept. My real big concern, though, is how would we fund it? Are we taking taxpayer money to do this? If so, what's the cost and what's the benefit? Anytime we take taxpayer money and give it to individuals or to private groups, I have a lot of concerns about that. And I wonder if the tax money should have just originally stayed with those individuals so they could achieve their goals themselves. So if it was done here in the state of Utah, I think it would have to be extremely targeted and focused. For example, you mentioned agriculture and farming. I think that would be something that would be worth considering. But at the same time, I think we have to look at the impact those private lending groups that already exist in the state of Utah that also make those loans. Perhaps another way to look at it, just real briefly, would be to consider having a state bank that might guarantee at a lower rate those lower rates rather than making the loans themselves.
All right, let's go to Marlo next.
Yeah, so my guess would be Texas, but that's only because I'm married a Texan and they think everything started there. I would be concerned about the subsidization. It sounds like that those loans are being subsidized at a certain level. So that would be my concern about such a strategy. I mean, I think with a lot of these kinds of programs, the intent is good, but I'm not sure that there aren't unintended consequences as a result. So that's my 2 cents.
All right, Susan.
Well, I'll also admit I have no idea. I won't even venture a guess because it would probably be wrong and then I would offend the state. But I have some concerns as well, as far as, I would assume that there's probably some seed money coming in from the people that are chartering the bank. But I would also wonder what kind of role does that play with our other, we have the credit unions, we have the banking charters here in the state. And how are we going to protect the funding? Is there going to have to be some legislative action to let a bank like this operate? And what does that path look like? Somehow, whether we like it or not, I would be concerned about more regulation that could possibly hurt our other banking institutions.
Thank you. Let me go to Seth.
Yeah, so I have real concerns. If it's being subsidized by the government and we're impeding on free markets, I think that brings up a couple of conflicts just in terms of how that's managed. And I can see how it might be beneficial, but that's a part of why we ran into trouble during the financial crisis during 2008, is that the government subsidized loans and government subsidized entities basically created a an effect where people were piling into those loans and then stopped paying them, and it has a cascade effect. And then who had to bail it out? It was the federal government, and the federal government had to draw down significant monies. I think almost $700 million for TARP 1, and then there was a TARP 2. And I just don't think the role of the government should be involving itself in every aspect. There's different ways for people to get funding. There's already many private sectors that and private businesses that provide low cost funding. And so I would prefer, if it's state subsidized, that they stay out of it. If it's a private sector company that wants to do it and provide those loans, absolutely, let's do it. Let's do that and do it in a way where we can take advantage of the market.
And Cleon.
Thank you. No, that's an interesting question, and I would just say, number one, that's yeah, I wouldn't know which state that is that runs that, but I would say anything that has to do with rural Utah and an opportunity to help our farmers or people that are trying to that need capital to expand their business or whatever, that's a wonderful idea. What's not a wonderful idea is to do something you're not good at. And anytime you want to, it's best to stay with what you know how to do and what you do. It's best for government not to be the all in. From a conservative value standpoint, governments probably are not the best ones to be bankers. So I probably think there's probably some special thing about that state why they have a bank, but probably not something that we would want to do here in Utah. But let me just expand on that just a little bit. I actually serve on the Federal Home Loan Bank. I'm one of 22 board of directors, and understand we're the Federal Home Loan Bank of Des Moines, and we are provide liquidity and capital across 13 states. And we, as a co-op, we're actually owned by our member banks. And that's kind of a function that maybe, or am I out of time? I'm looking at Brad. Sorry, Brad. Do we have a time limit, Larry, on these questions? Is that?
Yeah, I probably should have been a little more clear when I started in on the Q&A, but generally we're doing 1 minute, 1 minute answers on the questions.
Again, I apologize. I would just say that we can be innovative and figure some things out. Being a state bank is probably not what we'd want to do in Utah.
All right, thank you each. Just so you guys know, I'm an attorney. Whenever the judge asks us how much time we need, I always tell him twice as much, because we just can't restrain ourselves. So don't worry, I'm lenient. Thank you, Bob, for that. You have a follow-up?
Well, I'll wait on that, but I just want to reveal the secret state was North Dakota.
North Dakota.
Oh yeah.
You do have some love for North Dakota. All right, let's go to Lowell Nelson. Lowell's one of our board members from Utah County and also an SCC member. Lowell, what's your question?
Thank you, Larry. My question is somewhat related, I suppose. Given the fact that Congress continues to inject capital, your currency or print Federal Reserve notes, which only devalues the value of the currency you got in your back pocket today. They've injected trillions of dollars, and thereby they are devaluing the dollar, the Federal Reserve note. And so just merely putting our money in a bank, it really does us no good nowadays. Here's my question. How much money do you have in the Utah State Treasury? What's its velocity, and how are you going to invest that money, and how much legislative latitude do you have to invest that money in assets, whether it's commodities, gold, silver, debt, Bitcoin, whatever, in order to maintain its value?
All right, very challenging question. I'm going to rotate the order. We'll start with Marlo, Susan, Seth, Cleon, and Chip for this question, and try to keep 1 minute if you can.
Yeah.
Marlo?
So yes, the Utah Money Management Act is what determines how a portfolio is managed in the state. So, and that is a function, the application of the Utah Money Management Act is a function of the size of the portfolio. and what its purpose is. So I sit on the investment committee at Utah Valley University as a volunteer, and we had to write investment policy statements that were based on the Utah Money Management Act. And so there was only a certain amount that we could have in alternative investments, which is what you're talking about, Lowell, the gold and other inflationary hedge type of investments would be considered alternatives. So the Utah Money Management Act determines what is feasible, what is allowable under the state law. So each guidelines can be customized around that, but it's going to be a function of what the purpose of that portfolio is, how large it is, et cetera.
All right, thank you. We got Susan next.
All right, well, it's tough in the treasurer's office because we've got about 19 boards of which we either have oversight or we're being told how we're going to be investing the money or what we're going to be doing with the money. The legislature tells us what we're going to be doing with the money. And to Marlo's point, we're also bound by the Utah Management Money Act. At the end of the day, as a state treasurer, you know, constitutionally, we're supposed to be prudent with people's money. And within those bounds, within the acts and the statutes that we're bound with, we certainly need to be reviewing what we're investing in, but we also need to be prudent as that could, because, you know, we have that fiduciary duty to the citizens. So we'll continue to invest monies prudently. We'll continue to look at opportunities for other instruments, but we're really bound by statute as to what we can do.
All right, thank you, Seth.
Yeah, so I think why we are bound by the Utah Money Management Code, we are bound by statutes. There is some flexibility in terms of setting what investments we do. And I can tell you from a personal perspective in terms of how I manage our investments in terms of the company, we have, right now I don't want to be in assets. I don't want to be in cash. I don't want to be assets that are not indexed to inflation. And so our investment style reflects that. In the state, it's going to be a little bit different. We are going to have some constraints, but even if you look at Utah retirement system, that board, one of the board's duties is to set the allocations in terms of how they're going to invest in different asset classes. And so there's 6 different asset classes that the Utah retirement system invests in. And 2 of those, one is private equity, one is real property, which includes real estate and includes commodities. And so I think there is some flexibility within the money management code, depending on what you're talking about, to increase those types of investments through the board. And I think that's something where having that understanding and be able to look into it is going to be important. Now, I think if you look at that, you look at the SIPCO board and some of the other boards, that it's similar in terms of how they've diversified it. So yeah, I'll take a look at that. And I think inflation is actually one of the huge issues that's complicating the investment environment right now. So understanding how to invest in that and making sure that we have investment managers and policies in place that are going to deal with that's important. I think for the largest fund, for the PTIF fund, it's such short duration in terms of debt securities. Most of them turn over very quickly that it's going to be a natural hedge. But yeah, let's take a look at the other portfolios and make sure we're in the right spot to counter the effects of inflation.
All right, thank you, Cleon.
I would just say, in terms of the question, in the federal government printing money and causing inflation and the value of the dollar going down, that is a big problem. And that's a problem because we really need to address the understanding of the people and the citizens, so that they understand conservative values. They understand not only the value of money, but how to conservatively balance a budget so that you're not printing money and spending money that you don't have. In terms of investment, in terms of the Treasurer's Office, as we have kind of discussed, it's really a different type of investing. You're investing treasury monies because you have a need for those monies, and you've got to make sure that they're available when they're needed, and that they're actually very risk adverse in terms of what that investment is. So there'd be opportunities to invest wisely, add value through looking at yield curves, through looking at the timing of when you need the monies. But for the most part, when you're holding monies more long-term, or which you're probably not in the treasurer's office, because that's not what governments do. They try to match their inflows with their outflows. And if they're investing or if we're borrowing money in debt, now what you may be doing is having reserve funds or different things are invested long-term to maintain those debt funds. And I'm looking for Brad. My time. But the point would be the real problem here is printing money, and obviously we've got to lead the nation in terms of our conservative values and teach people what it is that means.
Thank you. And Chip?
Everybody's hit on it before, and I'll say it again, the amount of money we've injected, some of it completely unnecessary through quantitative easing and other federal fiscal policies over the last several years, is now having an impact on government investing. For just this afternoon, I met with one of our investment advisors to review our quarterly portfolio and how it's performing. And we are also too seeing that very real creeping of the inflation and that's impact on the market. In governmental investing, the code word is SLY, safety, liquidity, and yield. And so while you always try to find some yield that will outpace inflation, that safety and liquidity has to be the first and foremost consideration. To answer the deeper question about the Utah Money Management Act, which I work with every day, it's a reflection of the Utah Money Management Council. Now, that's an interesting thing. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'd love to be one, but I just don't have the time. But the Utah Money Management Council is largely made up of representatives from government, but also representatives from banking institutions and institutions that represent financial interests. Until there is somebody representing alternative investments on that board, I don't anticipate any changes. It was a question we asked of our investment advisor today, who sits on that board. We said, do you see any changes? And the most radical change they've made in the last several years was allowing for brokered CD rates to be used. So it's a great question. Not a lot of great long-term answers.
All right, thanks candidates for answering that round of questions. We'll go next to board member Delane England. Delane, are you there? She's one of our board members from Davis County. Does some great things there. Go ahead.
Thank you. I would like to know what you would do, each candidate, if in order to keep us from having some corruption or being scammed by someone who, some investment. How would you word it against that? Protect us.
Thank you, Delane. For this one, we'll start with Susan, and then Seth, Cleon, Chip, and Marlo will be our order. And we'll still be at 1 minute. So go ahead, Susan.
Great, thank you. I think that, first of all, due diligence is important regardless of what we're doing in the treasurer's office, and understanding the investment, the bond, whoever it is that we're working with, because corruption, unfortunately, is everywhere. And that means having the internal controls, not only within the treasurer's office, as we provide oversight services to some of these organizations, but that we also understand the internal controls within the organizations that we're working with. We talk about using some of these different investment products, and that's one arena where we don't always know what it is and how they're being managed, and they can be fraud. We've seen this over and over. I mean, Utah's the capital of affinity fraud, if you will, because we see it all the time. But I think that oversight, internal controls, and doing our due diligence are three simple ways that a lot of people just plain do not do.
Thank you, Seth.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Delane. So in terms of looking at investments, due diligence absolutely is important. So my background is investing in China and Asia. And if you want to see potential for fraud, take a look at some of those companies. I mean, for a while, there was a new fraud, it seemed like almost every day, in terms of some of these Chinese companies that were listing in the US, and it actually caused a whole asset class to be undervalued. And so I have a lot of experience in terms of looking at investments, doing a due diligence, and it comes down to process. And it's something that you have to teach, and you have to manage, and you have to make sure that skill set is held, and people have those skill set that are doing the due diligence and looking at the disclosures. If you don't do that, you run into problems. And that's something where I do have a strong belief in, and I do have a strong background is in doing that due diligence and then managing a process and managing people that go through that due diligence. And so I've taught courses on due diligence. I've managed large due diligence processes where billions of dollars were going to be invested in specific deals. And I also have a background as a forensic fraud auditor. And so I think with that type of background, I can provide the culture and the process to make sure that we don't run into those types of issues, because I have experience in avoiding those issues.
Thank you. Cleon?
I would just say, Delane, thank you for the question, and it's a good question. And I think the best way to protect yourself in the Treasurer's office from fraud is to elect someone with experience that understands how to keep your investments safe and secure. And for the most part, we do that in terms of how what we're allowed to invest in. But even a broader, I think your question's even broader, and that is, how do we protect our citizens from fraud? How do we protect our neighbors from fraud? And that's, I think the Treasurer's office could maybe do some things around financial literacy. Maybe they could do some things around, because there's a certain category of people that get defrauded, I think, as you see that. And a lot of times they're very trusting and maybe a little less sophisticated in terms of finance. And I think financial literacy could help that quite a bit. And I think maybe even government, I want limited government, small government. There's a role for government, and part of the role for government is protect us. And I think we could do some things, and that we probably have, but we could make sure we've got those government protections in terms of the way we allow people to solicit and do things that could possibly hurt some of our neighbors that are being defrauded.
Thank you. We'll go to Chip.
Hi, Delane. Real simply, I can tell you about how it works from a local government level. We have a very specific list in the state of Utah of qualified investment advisors that governments can work with. So counties, other states, agencies. And so that qualified investors list is a good start. These individuals have to be registered and vetted with the state of Utah. The other thing I would add is that, as has been mentioned in the chat, the state treasurer is required to carry a fully completed audit in his office at all times for the perusal of the public. It's a step towards transparency, but it also, I think, something I'm big on in government, we got to keep our roles separate. The state auditor really is there to make sure that the money is correctly accounted for and that GASB and GAP processes are followed where appropriate. The state treasurer's office, in terms of protecting fraud, they currently use 2 investment advisory services. Both are nationally known and very well regarded, but the preventing fraud itself within state government is going to come down to internal controls. I'm certified by the Association of Public Treasurers of the United States in internal controls. I've helped teach local government and local treasurers internal controls throughout the state of Utah. And it's something I enjoy because you get to kind of play, poke holes at things and say, and find processes and things that aren't exactly working in local governments and then try to improve those. I've had the chance to write cash management policies for my city and help other cities do so as well. And so that's what it comes down to. It comes down to really being diligent and ensuring and enforcing those internal controls.
Thank you. And Marlo, you're up.
Yes, thank you. So I think one of the key issues that goes even beyond the fraud is having the office resourced correctly in terms of oversight, and you've got to have more than just one person overseeing a large portfolio. You've got to have the like folks have mentioned, internal controls, but that also means having the right resources that are available in the treasurer's office to oversee the portfolios effectively, and that gets to risk management on a broader scale, even beyond fraud. So that's where I would be focused. That's a way to manage the fraud and just overall risk management in general.
All right, great question, great answers. Thank you, Delane. Let's go to Mary Burkett, if you're there. Mary's from Washington County, also on our board, a good friend of mine and a former SEC member. So Mary, what's your question?
My question is for each candidate. You know, obviously the governor has some say in who becomes the new state treasurer. How well do you each know the governor? Have you spoken with him personally about your candidacy? And just, that's it.
I like that. Very interesting question. First time I've heard that asked. So we'll start with Seth, and then we'll go back to the top of my list with Cleon, Chip, Marlo, and Susan. So Seth, you're up.
I don't personally know the governor. I know people who know the governor and will be willing to vouch for me, both on a personal basis and professionally. But yeah, I'm going to go through, and I think this is one of those situations where when you get in the top three, the governor hopefully puts everything aside, and I think he will, and choose the best person qualified for the job. And I think for what Utah needs, they need to have somebody who has a strong experience in terms of investments, in terms of finance organizations, and the treasurer role calls for that. And I think it also needs to have somebody who's going to go support the party and make sure that we continue to keep Utah centered on the conservative values. And so if he judges on that basis, I think it's going to be a great selection.
Cleon?
Yeah, I don't know Governor Cox. I think I've probably met him at an event, but I don't know him, and I do feel like one of the roles in this beautiful process, in this vetting process, is an opportunity to get to know these 10 candidates, of which they're all great, and have an opportunity to understand who they are, what their experience is, what they could bring to the office. But I'm also in agreement. I would think the citizens of Utah deserve the best qualified, best prepared candidate for treasurer, and I think that's going to have to do with experience, and particularly experience that counts, experience around the core functions of the treasurer's office. So I think municipal bond issuance is a key function. I think investing has been mentioned as a key function. Obviously, banking relationships are really key. But even more so, I would probably say that serving on 19 boards and commissions, bringing a perspective of financial advice, that's going to be key. So.
Thank you. That next would be Chip.
Hi, Mary. I've met Governor Cox 2 or 3 times at various events where he's either visited with cities as a whole. I had a chance twice to meet with him in meetings regarding city legislative issues. If you asked him if he knows Chip Dawson, he'd be like, "I'm sorry." So I don't have a personal relationship with him. I do have a great deal of respect for him and for his wife and for all they do for our state and our communities. He's got a really tough job. And I think something, if I were Governor Cox, is I would really lean on my lieutenant governor as well, Deidre Henderson. She is somebody who really understands and knows, I think, the people of Utah, their conservative values, and more importantly, their life priorities. What do they want to see? What do they want out of their lives? I think Lieutenant Governor Henderson is somebody who's really good at articulating those things on behalf of voters. My mayor happens to have a very personal, close relationship with Governor Cox. It'd be wholly inappropriate for me to ask her to reach out. I have not made that request. I will not make that request. It's inappropriate. It's inappropriate for me as a government employee to do that. So if I get the chance to meet with Governor Cox, I'm going to have to do it just like other candidates have mentioned, on the basis of my experience, my education, my background. I think Governor Cox is really looking for somebody who can help advise him on how the state treasurer's office can help him accomplish the goals that he and the legislature come to agreement on. And so I think that's going to be the key thing. He obviously has a vision for the state. The legislature has the purse strings, and where they agree, it's going to be coming to find that right advice or that right path for those goals financially.
Thank you. Marlo.
Yes, I do not know Governor Cox, have not met him before, and so I came into this process knowing that I had to disadvantages. I didn't know a lot of SEC members, and I didn't know Governor Cox. So that's a hurdle that if I'm fortunate enough to move into the next round, we'll tackle that when it comes up.
And Susan.
Have not worked directly with Governor Cox. I've worked indirectly via the legislature as we've tackled tax reform issues, especially during the 2021, a little bit towards the end of 2020 session, where certainly he was lieutenant governor. He has spoken at some of the Utah Association of CPA conferences. We've certainly invited him to come talk. But knowing that and the relationship that I've had with the legislature, I have made a very intentional decision not to contact him at this point in time, because I think that he needs to be able to think through the 10 candidates and be unbiased, if you will, in the decision that he needs to make, because the treasurer does need to be able to advise the governor on not only the treasury responsibilities, but be able to advise the governor on policy issues that could affect things within our office, such as the AAA bond rating. So hopefully, you know, we'll see what happens and the best decisions are made.
Thank you. That was an interesting question. We didn't get that on the last round of candidates, and those were the more political ones. I kind of divided you guys into politicians, non-politicians. So you guys are the non-politician candidates in this second group. And so interesting answers. Staying on the theme of politics a little bit, I'm going to throw in a question as a board member and also an SEC member. I've asked some of you this, but I give you a chance to share it with everyone here. Because this is a Republican nomination, and also many of us are looking for someone who represents our platform values. My question is not just what you believe, but what have you done in the past either years recently or in your life that would show us that you are a platform Republican? And so let me start, this time we'll start back at the top with Cleon, Chip, Marlo, Susan, and Seth. Share something that shows us your Republican credentials.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, Larry. And early on in my career, I was a state delegate for the Republican Party. I have supported the Republican Party my whole life, from in terms of who I am and what I believe. It's the Republican Party platform. That's sincerely who I'll be, and that's the values that I think are that will help our system of government be successful. And obviously, finances are a big part of conservatism, but it's more than that. The values of religion, the values of family, the values of heritage, those are things that we see in the Republican Party platform. And quite frankly, I've done a lot of community service. I work at Utah Housing Corporation. My whole life has really been about making the community better, serving our affordable housing communities in a spectrum of whether it's home ownership all the way down to near homeless. We talked a little bit earlier about different states, maybe they have their own bank, but different states have different resources. And one of the things that Utah has is a value system of people of faith. And that is part of that, in my mind, conservative values. And that's a big asset in terms of homeless and what's been done around that realm. If you go to other states, they may have another type of asset or attribute that they leverage. But conservatism, I think, in terms of our heritage, is who Utah is. It's who I am. And I'm very proud of that. And I'm proud of the Republican Party. And I'm proud of speaking up and saying what it is we believe in, and saying what we mean and doing what we say. That's who I am. And I think that's what the Republican Party stands for.
Thank you. Let me go to Chip.
Hi. I've served as a county delegate. I've served as a state delegate for the Utah Republican Party, and I enjoyed those experiences very much. I stepped away from those just a bit because I honestly believe that I had that experience. It was a wonderful experience, but I also think it's time for some of my other neighbors to step up and serve as well and have that opportunity like I did. I would really say how I try to contribute is by supporting good Republican candidates. So, for example, I served as a campaign treasurer in for the GOP candidate for the Salt Lake County sheriff's race, and it was a great opportunity for me to combine my professional experience, but also help advocate for someone who was running for a partisan office, and specifically as a GOP candidate. Somebody from Summit County asked me, what are your thoughts on America First? And I said, that's such a great, I have a background in marketing. It's such a great slogan. But I said, we've always been America First, and we always will be America First. What we need to be is Utah First right now. I don't know if we can control all the things we see going on around us in so many other states. What we can control and what we have the best opportunity to influence is how things operate here in the state of Utah. And so I think about the GOP and their role in that, and that role is to lead. Years ago, I remember driving down I-15, and if it's somebody in this group, I owe you a milkshake or a beer, your choice. It was a simple ad of a young woman in scrubs, and it just said, Republic, I can. And it was just Republic in blue and I can in red. That, for me personally, encapsulates everything I believe about conservatism in the Republican Party. I work for a city, but my name's Chip Dawson. I'm here for the government, and I'm here to tell you, you could probably do it better than we can. And I think that message is something we can keep strong in Utah.
All right, thank you. Marlo, you're next.
Yeah, so I believe that the private sector often has better answers and better solutions than does the government. The government is the most inefficient operation in the world. And so I am grateful to be able to choose causes that I want to support. And to that end, I've co-founded a couple of nonprofits over the last 6 years. One of them helping children K through 12 with getting them excited about robotics or STEM education. And the other one is helping single mothers with children to get a better education to be able to support themselves. So that's true Republican values, I think, at work, where we believe that we as individuals can produce better outcomes than our government.
Thank you. Susan, you're up.
Let me unmute. So most recent, and I mean most recent, my life has revolved around tax reform in the state of Utah. As many of you know, we've battled starting with HB 441 in 2018 and then 2019. We've been very involved in that, testifying several times before the tax interim committees on the Senate side and the House of Reps side as to how and why the policies that were in those bills could be detrimental and harmful to the public. I mean, I ran radio ads on that, and that was instrumental in helping to defeat those referendums. Even this year, we battled tax on the PPP loans that many of our citizens got blindsided with regards to how the state was going to handle the taxability on those. Now, there could be some different arguments made from a policy standpoint, but that the people were told that they weren't going to be taxed on those PPP loans did not bode well for our Utah businesses, especially as they're trying to come out of this. So that would be my most recent way. I've been very, very involved in these tax policy and tax referendums and tax reforms, trying to maintain lower tax rates and helping the people understand what happens when we continue to tax the people.
Thank you. And then we've got Seth.
Thanks, Larry. So when I was 19, one of my neighbors ran for state legislature, and it was he asked for support. So I went to our mass meeting and got elected to be a delegate to the Utah County Convention. And so I went there. It was a great experience, and to beat the candidates, to be able to talk to them as a 19-year-old. And he ended up getting the nomination and ultimately getting elected and serving the legislature for a few terms. And that was a seminal lesson to me, just how valuable our system is and how valuable it is if we can get involved. And I ended up moving away from Utah for a while, but when I came back, moved back full time, one of the first things I did, I'll admit, was buy a truck. But the thing I did after that was actually I went to our mass meeting and got elected to be a state delegate. And it's important to me to be involved. And I was a state delegate in 2018, 19, and 20. And we moved, so I wasn't able to be a state delegate for this convention, but I did go volunteer my time, helped out with the credentials desk, and got to see all the good work that Kim Goldman, Baldery, Brooke, all those people did. I mean, there's too many to mention, right, to put it off. And I think they overcame a lot of obstacles to do that. And it's important to me that we do these things. And I've donated to, I've been stepping up my activity because I do think we're at an inflection point, and the party is an important part of maintaining the conservative values. And so thank you for all of you that have stepped up to make sure that we have a good values and there's accountability to our platform. And I've donated to candidates, and I donated to the party to make sure that we could have the convention in person, because it is important. And regardless of what happens with the treasurer race, I plan to dedicate a lot of resources and time into the party, because I think it's important that we continue to build the party and we keep Utah centered on conservative values.
All right, thank you each for answering my question. That is great. I appreciate each of your involvements in the party. We've got a couple more questions from board members. I know Adley's been waiting patiently, and I'll be sure to get to his question because I know it's a good one that he asked earlier. Bob, you've got your hand up, but Lisa sent me a question. Lisa Shepard is on our board, and she's kind of helping us host with the technical side, so she couldn't raise her hand. She wanted me to ask what your views are on our Utah Republican platform planks. She's regarding taxation, regarding regulation, regarding economic development. We have planks in our Republican platform on each of those. And so Lisa wanted me to ask, what are your views on those Republican platform planks? And we'll start with Chip, then we'll just keep going down my list. Marlo, Susan, Seth, and Cleon, with Lisa's question about one more time, I'll say it, the taxation, regulation, and economic development planks. And I'll just throw in one more thing that if any of you want to comment on, Susan mentioned a little bit about referendums. Somebody had posted in the chat if any of you were involved with the tax referendum. So it may be a big question, but let's start with Chip.
Hi, Lisa. Yeah, I know. I absolutely support the Republican platform when it comes to taxation, regulation, and economic development. Since 2018, I was appointed by outgoing Governor Gary Herbert, former Governor Gary Herbert, to serve on the Private Activity Bond Review Board, something I know Cleon's familiar with as well. In that, the legislature allocates to our board a certain amount of money for bonding, and that bonding is then used to help developers continue to build homes, and it also helps a lot of businesses that are relocating to the state as well. And so I struggle sometimes being kind of more maybe a little bit libertarian leading, like why are we doing this? But I do see that economic development, there can be a role for the government in setting the table, not putting the food on and not filling everybody's cup, but there can be that opportunity in terms of economic development. I've seen it in my city that I've been a part of. I've seen where government and a manufacturer can work together in a certain way to benefit everybody, all the parties involved. And but yeah, no, thank you for the question.
Let's go to Marlo.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. I have read through and found nothing objectionable on the platform. In fact, I think regulation and taxation, economic development, those are. It's always to me a little bit scary when government gets involved in anything because it is such an inefficient operation. Economic development is an interesting one. My concern comes in when you have the government trying to bring in outside businesses And we already have very successful businesses here, and they're competing with businesses that we're trying to attract, and it can harm our current businesses that are already here, the Utah businesses. That's a concern I have. But overall, you know, I believe very strongly in the Republican platform and in these areas. I did not have anything to do with the tax referendum other than signing a petition to not go through with the tax changes and tax increases.
Thank you. I've got Susan next.
Great, thank you. So I think that most of you probably know where I stand as far as tax reform, taxation. I truly believe that the lower taxes, if we get lower taxes, people invest in the economy on their own. Lower taxes are going to force our government to shrink down, if you will, and let the market drive the forces that need to be done there. Regulation plays a role in that. More regulation really ties our hands behind our back, and it prevents oftentimes us from really being able to do the things that we could do. Now, there is some need for some regulation, but we need to watch that we don't get so out of control that we really cripple the people. And that leads into economic development. One thing that I've noticed over the years as I've been involved in legislative issues, and I've noticed this for probably about 20 years, is a concern that I have from a legislative standpoint is that our legislature will often pass bills that are, in my opinion, Wasatch Front centric, meaning that sometimes, often legislation is passed with the Wasatch Front in mind, and we're not taking into consideration what's going on in rural Utah. And rural Utah, it's a completely different animal in some aspects. And we hamper their ability to really do what they can do by some of the policies that we're setting. So just a few thoughts for you there.
You have got Seth next, and then Cleon.
Yeah, so I believe limited government, and along with that, low taxation is one of the fundamental tenets. And any time that we start looking at taxes, we start looking at regulation, what we're doing is growing the government, and that ultimately is going to infringe on our personal liberty. And it's also going to impact free markets. And the farther we move away from that, the less efficient we get in almost every instance. Now, there are going to be a few parts of government that we have to have, and the Treasury functions one of that, and there's a role for economic development, and there's other areas the government's going to be involved in, but we need to make sure to keep those efficient and well run. And I think that's something that Utah's done well, and that's something that we need to remain focused on so we don't have that growth. But I think there is this natural urge to go fix problems by going and regulating it, having the government get involved, and to go do that, then to bring in funds so they can cover things that are best covered by the private sector. And we need to avoid those urges at all costs. And it's hard, and we have to stand up for it. But the more we do that, the better off we're going to be. And I believe in the private sector, and I believe in market solutions. And if you look at states like California that have moved away from market solutions into more regulation and larger government, there are problems right there. They're not able to balance their books. They're not efficient in the services they deliver. And people are leaving and moving to states like Utah.
And Cleon. You're muted. Let's get you unmuted.
I would just say I'm supportive of the Republican platform and of the planks. And I would just say in terms of taxation has been expressed as conservative values. I think taxes really have to be, there's a time when you need taxes, but once we tax, we ought to review our taxes and make sure we don't just leave them on because they're already on the books and we're dependent on them. So in terms of regulation, I think less is better, but obviously there's times when we're trying to protect certain vulnerable communities or peoples or whatever. We need regulation, and we need regulation around the tax code, obviously, and around just government itself. But less regulation would be better, simply because the economies will grow and build better with with that freedom that's of lower taxes and less regulation. It impacts business decisions when you have those things. So you have to be cautious. You have to be thinking about, the decision-making standpoint, you have to understand the consequences that you're bringing. As in terms of economic development, I too am sensitive in terms of the decision-making around that. I do believe in our rural communities that don't have access to capital or certain things. We're going to be in a growth, we are in a growth mode in the state and will be, and we need to develop certain economic areas, particularly in some of our rural communities, and in some other communities, maybe they're not as needed. So I do think there's a role for government to kind of leverage that, make that work. But I'm supportive of the Republican planks.
Thank you, each of you, for that. Now, Bob, you asked a question earlier, but you said you've got another doozy. Is that right for us? Challenge
Yeah,
our paradigms here.
I waited it. It's a paradigm tester here. It really is. And I'll drop it in the chat again, just so everybody can see it. And these guys did great on the honor system last time, so I'm going to trust them. So as a history major, I kind of look at when one state does something different than all the others, it's kind of interesting. And I would agree with Seth's tonight. He stated how usually basically government is, I'll just synthesize it and say slower and more expensive. I mean, I work for the federal government, so that's how it goes. However, once in a while, states do it better, or the government does it better. So one of 50 states handles title insurance for their population. They don't have private title insurance companies. So when they go to sell their house, it's actually about 1/6 the normal cost. So my question is, what do you think of that idea? Should Utah do that too? And bonus if you know the state. It was mentioned earlier tonight, but really, what do you think of the idea of the state picking that up if they could do it more efficiently for the citizens?
All right, very interesting question. The order I've got now is starting with Marlo, Susan, Seth, Cleon, and Chip. And let me just mention, we are getting a little late into the night here, but if we go a few minutes over, I don't think that'll hurt. We started a few minutes late, and I want to make sure everybody can ask their questions. And so candidates, if you're patient, we'll be patient. We'll finish strong here. So let me go to Marlo.
Yeah, so I'm going to guess North Dakota because that's what I missed last time. But yeah, so no, it is an interesting situation when you do have government that can actually supply something at a lower cost. And I would want to understand that a little bit more. I don't know exactly how they're pulling that off, but certainly that would be something to look into. I guess my concern is once you have a government program, it's hard to get rid of a government program, and so it may start out as very efficient and evolve or devolve into something much less efficient. So that would be my thought off the top of my head.
Thank you. I've got Susan next.
You know, there's that saying, if it sounds too good to be true, there's probably something not right with it. I certainly would want to look into that if we can, because some of those title policies, any of us in real estate, we know that they can be pretty pricey with the closing of a property, regardless of residential, commercial, governmental, or whatever. But I would certainly want to do some due diligence and investigating as to what this really means, number one. And number two, are there any unintended consequences to bringing this in under the umbrella of the government rather than than keeping it in the private sector? Because the market, if people got wind of this, the market found out that so-and-so's doing it for a lot cheaper, is there opportunity for the free market to drive those prices down? So, those are a couple things that I would want to look into.
Thank you. I've got Seth next.
Yeah, and so Bob, I think that's a really interesting question, and you do have some doozies there. I'll admit I did not know the states, and I'm not familiar with what they're doing. And I guess like the others, I would really love to look into it because I do love innovation. I like to see where we can make improvements, and there are certain government services that the state does provide. But I really want to see in there, and I'm just reminded of when a government does get in, do something that does something well, does that set a precedence for them start to do more and more and more? And I think and I don't think that's the way you're going with it. If they can do something in an isolated way that's more efficient, sure. It's just when the government gets cocky and they start thinking, all right, we're going to do this and we're going to do that and we're going to do that, I think it can be a treacherous path sometimes. So I would love to look into it, and where there's innovation, let's take advantage of it and implement it if we can. But let's also be wary of the path that we put ourselves on when this government starts being more involved in things that the private sector can take care of.
Thank you. Cleon and then Chip.
Bob, yeah, that's these are good questions. And again, I think in terms of conservative values, it's best that government be limited, and that they do what they're good at. This actually could be something they're good at. Not only innovation, but obviously title insurance has a lot to do with government and county recording and records. So there might be a little opportunity here, but so it's an interesting question, and I think it is appealing in that in terms of real estate and the pricing and in terms of what's happening in terms of the market. It probably could help affordability if you could cut some of those overhead costs. So I think it's intriguing, but I would caution that I'm not so sure that's the role of government. So.
And Chip?
Yeah, I'm really intrigued by the idea, and I think it was something I could be supportive of. If we could do three things, the three things I'd like to see done with regards to this is a lot of title data is already in government hands at counties and state level. Let's digitize that. I did a title search for the city of South Jordan a number of years ago. It doesn't require a whole lot of work. It doesn't require a whole lot of insurance. And I looked at those costs compared to what I know I paid for my own personal property title insurance, and it's completely ineffective. During a very dark time period of my life, I like to joke, I went to law school. No offense, Larry. I got about halfway through it. I should have listened to my wife. She goes, "This isn't for you. You're not an attorney." And I'm like, "You're right." But anyway, when I did that in California, after you get a law license, you can turn around and immediately apply to get a real estate license. And they're almost automatic. And the understanding is that, if you've gone to law school, you understand enough about contracts and titles to take care of your own personal private needs, and then the property needs of other people as well. I have a dear friend who's an attorney here who was going to buy a house 3 doors down from me. And he goes, "I'm going to do the title work." And he says, anybody can do title work. So I think it's something that the title companies are convincing you that there's a need for them. And just like government sometimes do, like, "Oh, there's a role for us, this and this," there really isn't. And I think it's an outdated idea. My guess would be, I was wrong on the last one. I didn't even venture a guess. I'm going to go Nebraska just because my grandfather was from there, and he's on my thoughts tonight. But we've got enough innovation. We've got enough technology. There is no reason a title transfer couldn't be done with the technology that we have existing now. And I think it would be something really interesting to look for, with a caveat that it's a flat fee from the state to cover their costs, and that this isn't turned around and used for any kind of nefarious purposes, including ridiculous taxes or fees or anything like that.
Thanks for your answers, Bob. The quick reveal for those who didn't see it in the chat.
Yeah, the reveal is the state is Iowa, and it's about 1/6 the cost. We had a gentleman say he closed his home in Iowa. He was shocked at how cheap the title insurance was.
All right, thank you, Bob. Let's open it up now. Our PAC members have done a good job of covering us with a lot of questions. Adley, you've been waiting patiently. I know you asked a real good question in the first session. And if you want to do that same one or another one, you're up, my friend. Just so everyone knows, he's a new SCC member from Washington County, and we're excited to have him with our delegation.
No worries, Larry. It's a great time it's a privilege and honor to be here, honestly. I'm glad to be able to be serving with you guys.
Little louder, Adley.
Oh, okay. Sorry, can you guys hear me now? Is that better? Perfect. All right. So my question is a simple one. I asked the previous the previous candidates this as well, but my question is, if you are not appointed by the governor to be the treasurer this time around, will you run for treasurer in 2022 November?
Great question. If everybody could hear it. If you're not elected, if you're not the one selected in this process, will you run next year for the office? And the order I've got, we'll move to Susan, Seth, Cleon, Chip, and Marlo for this question. This one doesn't have to be long if you want to keep this one short, or if you want to tell us why or why not. Go ahead, Susan.
You know, it's kind of a loaded question. Whoever wins this office is going to have to hit the road running, because there is an interim campaign that they're going to have to run in 2022 to finish out Treasurer Damshen's term. So I would be inclined to want to support the candidate that's running, that's having to run this short election if they're doing the job that they should be doing. I wouldn't want to give a definitive yes or no. I will remain involved in politics and the legislature regardless.
Seth?
Yeah, so this question's come up a few times in conversations, and I'll just give the same answer. It depends on who's appointed and the job they're doing. And if I think that I can do a better job and I can make a difference, then yeah, I'll definitely consider running.
I've got Cleon next.
Yeah, I believe in terms of the party and supporting the candidate that's running, that the incumbent in the office, but I also feel like this is such an important role. It's important that the state treasurer actually has the right experience to do the job, and I think that what also is important is we've got to, I think as we look into the next election, 2022, we want to make sure that we protect that office, and depending on who's appointed and what type of abilities they have, it may be that that we would want to at least have a conversation about who the nominee should be. So if that's the case, depending on who's elected, you know, it may be something that I would consider.
Thank you. I've got Chip next.
The short answer is no. I see this as a really great opportunity to run for state treasurer. If I was fortunate enough to be selected, I'd be over the moon and ready to go to work. And I believe it was Susan mentioned that there's a very short timeline here to go from appointed state treasurer to literally 6 months, 12 months later, you're running a full-blown statewide campaign. And so my function would be I serve on the board of the Utah Association of Public Treasurers, and we would interact with that treasurer candidate. So I think it would be, I don't want to say inappropriate, but probably not just the greatest idea to go out and run against that person, especially if I felt that the candidate was doing an admirable job. We've got a lot of new faces and new people running for treasurer. And something I throw out is, there's actually a lot of treasurer jobs open in local government, and they are some fun places. And if somebody was interested from this group and looking at that, I would definitely encourage you to do that. We always need more great people like what we see tonight working in local government.
And Marlo.
Yeah, I don't have any intention of running, and if I weren't selected, and so I would tend to be supportive of the person that was chosen, but never say never. But that would be where I would kind of come down on is to support the one that is in office.
All right, thanks each for answering that. Ben, you've got your hand up. This will be the last question, Ben Summerhalder, and then we will go to our closing statements, okay?
Quick question. The Money Management Act has not been revised in 10 years. If you're selected as a state treasurer, what if anything would you recommend for revision?
Very good question. I've got Seth and then Cleon, Chip, Marlo, and Susan.
All right, thanks for the question, Ben. So I do think there's an opportunity for the new treasurer to work with the counties and the municipalities and the legislature to update certain parts of. During the course of the conversations, I had one conversation with somebody at the county level where something as simple as cutting an electronic check is not permissible under the Utah Money Management Act. And so I would definitely work with the municipalities and the counties to work through issues like that. So we're able to take advantage of technology and be more efficient where it's possible. And then I think we should take a look in terms of flexibility. There's a lot of things happening, in terms of asset classes. And I think we probably want to take a look at that and make sure that we have enough flexibility. If we get through to a hyperinflation state, I don't think that will occur, but there we could go through a period where there is higher inflation than normal. We may want to have a little bit more latitude just in terms of how we invest on these monies. And so I think that's something that we should take a look at, have a serious evaluation and make sure that we come together as a state and have good management and flexibility going forward.
Thank you. Let's go to Cleon.
Yeah, I think it's in. Can you hear me?
Yep,
I think it's
you're good.
important to look at the Money Management Act and make sure that we're up to date, make sure that we're able to use the innovation, technology, the things, the tools we have in the marketplace. I also remember when the Money Management Act was brought into place, and the reason it's there is really to protect public monies and to help public treasurers to invest and do things the right way. Because sometimes, if you, again, without good experience, without understanding the consequences of some of the decisions that are being made, you can be vulnerable, which is why the Money Management Act was put into place. But I fully support keeping it current with where we're at in time. It's just it would be a very thoughtful process and one that would not be taken lightly.
Thank you, Chip.
I don't want to sound like a jerk, Bob. There's a revision every year, and there's a manual that sits on my desk every year. I'm at my home desk, or otherwise I'd pull up my last 4 years worth, and so they are frequently updated and revised. Like I said, when you talk about a revision, I think what maybe you're referring to is a recodification, which sometimes happens in legislative processes. So again, that is at the direction of the legislature and the Money Management Council. And again, I've talked about how the membership of the Money Management Council dictates a lot of the policies that you see then come forward with. In my time as city treasurer, when I first got here, we had 3 ways that residents could pay their bills. That's ridiculous. First of all, we live in the heart of the financial tech sector. And so we went out and got some bids, and we found a company that could give us 7 ways that our residents could pay their utility bills. And so we didn't find anything in the Money Management Act that directly contradicted that. And so as technology changes, as society's preferences change, and as our financial situations change, we are heading into a period of inflation. The next 24 months are going to be very interesting. And so I think the first major change, if anything was done in the Money Management Act, has to be providing local treasurers with a tool to fight those inflation and the things. And I think at some point the issue is going to come up of cryptocurrency. What, if anything, can be done with public monies in regards to cryptocurrency? And so I think that's a conversation to have. It's going to require a lot of thought, maybe some out of the box thinking, but I think those are the things that we need to look for in our next.
Thanks. We got Marlo, then Susan.
Yeah, so I think you have to balance being too flexible and overly prescriptive with the Money Management Act. I spent quite a bit of time writing investment policy statements and updating them annually, and looking at the Money Management Act in the investment area. It named one vendor that was acceptable to be used at from Utah Valley University's investment foundation. To me, that's overly prescriptive. It's outdated. It needs to be looked at, and so we do need to be updating that on a regular basis, like we are. But I think having the right perspectives is very important, and I would bring that investment perspective to the table.
Go ahead, Susan.
Great, thank you. You know, a couple things. I think it's always a good idea to review the Money Management Act, and I think it is, you know, to what Chip has said, it's reviewed. We're getting some updates and whatnot. Doesn't hurt to look, you know, if we need to codify it. I do believe it needs to be brought up to the 21st century. We're in a digital world now. I mean, we fast forwarded into that over the last 12 months with dealing with COVID. I know very few people that even know what a check is anymore. So we need to get into some 21st banking practices, some 21st century investment practices. We need to look at whether we're holding the cities, municipalities, even our state back with how we can invest, but we also need to be mindful of what our custodial and fiduciary duties are. So, and to everyone else's point, yeah, we're dealing with, we don't know how long this inflationary period is going to last. And I think to have some guidance or some better opportunity within that act to manage that would be helpful as well.
All right, thanks for everyone who had questions, for the great answers. It's time for the closing pitch, where each of the candidates will get 2 minutes to persuade us, and particularly those of us who are on the State Central Committee, why we should vote for them or put them in our top 3 Saturday morning. So according to my calculations here, I think we've come full circle back where we started. So I'm just going to go in alphabetical order with Cleon, Chip, Marlo, Susan, and Seth, and it'll be 2 minutes each. And we're a little over time, but thanks for everyone's patience, and we're excited to hear your final statements of why we should vote for you. You are up, Cleon. And let's get you unmuted. There we go.
I will start with what I think in terms of the Utah State Treasurer needs to be, and that is an accountable voice of the people. It needs to be transparent voice, an independent voice, a trusted voice, a voice that can administer our financial guidances and guide the financial decisions of the state in a way that will be independent of outside influence. The treasurer really is so important to the future decision-making of the state and conservative values, because they do function around financial considerations. I think in terms of why I would be a good candidate for treasurer is because of my background in the Treasury functions. It is interesting that in terms of structuring municipal bonds, I've been involved in over 12 billion, hundreds of bond issues. I have been in not only structuring the bond issues, but also meeting with rating agencies to maintain the ratings. Utah housing bonds, 60% of them are AAA rated. And so I have not only led that, but I've also hired and trained and mentored and coached people at our office to be able to do those things, which are so important. I mentioned earlier, I sit on the Federal Home Loan Bank of Des Moines board of directors, and in that relationship, and actually, as I sat on a council for affordable housing, I was able to have great success with 22 other chairs and vice chairs of banks over the 13 states to update federal policy and legislation around affordable housing and helping our communities to be able to receive an opportunity to find a place where they could call home in terms of those federal legislation. So I think what I'm trying to say is I understand how to lead, I understand how to mentor, and I understand how to help the process. And so those are things that I think I would offer to the job. And just thank you for allowing us tonight to chat and to see each other. And I think my time looks like it's expired. So thank you.
Thank you, Cleon, for being with us, and appreciate you running. Chip, you are up next.
Great. Hey, thank you, Larry. Thank you, Utah Platform PAC. Thank you, everybody who's helped put this on. And thank you, candidates, for being here. It's great to hear all your thoughts and ideas. And I feel good knowing that whoever comes out of this group the state's going to be in great hands. I want to tell you a $36,000 story real quick. In December of 2019, one of my accountants on my team came to me with tears in her eyes, and she says, Chip, I'm going to get fired and it's almost Christmas. And I said, what are you talking about? And she says, I can't find $36,000 we deposited. The bank doesn't seem to have any recollection of it. So I spent, and this is about a week before the holidays, I called every person I knew at that bank personally. And I said, I need your help. I need your records. Where's this money going? This is public money. And I got no response. I got no emails. I got no texts. I got no phone calls. I got nothing. And so on the 23rd of December, after exhausting every resource I had and not getting any response, I went over and I told the assistant branch manager, because of course the manager's out on vacation. I said, I either need to walk out of here with a credit for $36,000 in my account, or I need to find those checks. And you guys need to find that. And so he was fortunate and kind enough. He went in the back took me into the vault, sat me down, and he pulled out these 2 giant boxes of checks. And what had happened is the bank had implemented a brand new software and a brand new check reconciliation process the week of Christmas. Now I ask you, who does that? And why do they still have jobs? I've never worked in banking, but good God, man. So they let me go through those checks. And after about 3 hours on my hands and knees, he finally comes and says, Chip, I've got to shut you down in about 15 minutes to lock up the vault. And I said, you got to give me some more time. And so I talked him into 15 more minutes, and lo and behold, we find 5 or 6 checks. Now these checks, $36,000 in the eternal scheme of things, it is a lot of money, but more importantly, it was public money. It was money paid by developers for development fees. It was something we had an obligation as a government to be able to deposit and account for. And I sure as heck didn't want to have to call one of these great developers and say, I've lost your money. It's the week of Christmas. Would you mind writing us another check? Oh, and by the way, pay a $50 stop cancel fee. I tell that story not because I'm a hero. I honestly credit one of my accountants. She's the hero for finding that error. I wrote a nasty letter to the bank. They tried to come sell me a bunch of new products and services in January. I threw them out of my office and I said, when you can come back and tell me where my $36,000 went while you guys were all on vacation, then I'd be love to talk to you about your new products and services, because your current one doesn't protect the people's money. I love serving as a public treasurer, and I would love serving the state of Utah as a public treasurer. Thank you all. I look forward to seeing you Saturday night.
Thank you, Chip, for being with us. Marlo, you're up next.
Thank you. Thank you for hosting this event. It's been great. I appreciate the opportunity. I just would end by saying that in this treasurer's role is fundamentally about investment management. The treasurer directly or indirectly oversees $70 billion in assets. That's the experience that I have, is institutional investment management, where investment management is about telling you what you should do with your money. Accounting is telling us what happened to our money. And there's a big difference between those two. Let me just end with a story that illustrates what I think is at the heart of investment management. That's risk management and having a focus on risk, whether you define that as inflation in the future or trying to meet obligations of a pension plan. So I had a professor in graduate school who talked about, wrote a very famous paper on orange juice futures markets and meteorologists, and who was the most, or who was best at predicting weather. And it turns out that it's orange juice futures markets. And why is that? Well, it's because there's money on the line. And if you can extract information from markets, there's a lot of value that you can gain. And so I was at Farmers Insurance when WorldCom and Enron blew up, and we had about 70 million in securities that were affected by that. And I started asking the question, is there anything we can do to anticipate that and anticipate any future problems? we ended up building a scoreboard of our top 150 credits, and it was represented about $4.5 billion portfolio. And in the spring of 2007, home builders popped up on that scoreboard. And that was long before there were problems in the housing market that had been identified. But 2006 vintage subprime mortgages were going delinquent at a much higher rate. At the end of the day, we ended up selling 100 million of those bonds, and we swapped out, lost about 8 basis points, giving up yield. But then when the housing market crashed, we were sleeping much better at night. So I think that's an example of the type of risk management and oversight that I'll bring to the table in the Treasurer's office.
Thank you, Marlo, and for being with us. Let's go to Susan.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think that the whole construction thing and the subprime rate interest rates, we were actually calling that back in 2003 when I was doing work, you know, in the public sector within my own practice. One of the things that I bring to the office is that I understand how policy affects both the public and the government and how they need to interlink in order to work together. I've been working with the legislative branch, and I understand and have been part of making sure that we maintain those 3 separations of powers as we work with the 3 branches of government. And I think that that's very important, because the Treasurer's office, even though oftentimes people think it's a back office, quiet office, it's a technical office, but it probably should be a little more of a public office, and there should be more communication to the people as to what's going on. And I can bring that in that I can easily understand some of these complex issues. I learned working with clients and working with the tax reform and whatnot, that you have to be able to explain things in easily digestible terms. And I can do that. I've been able to work closely with the staff of the Treasurer's office, even on some of the boards and coalitions that I sit in. As far as the Financial Empowerment Coalition, I'm the chair of that. And we've been able to bring consumer financial literacy opportunities to the people of the state of Utah. And I believe that the people, we talk about the Treasurer's office needing to maintain that AAA bond rating. You and I, citizens, have a role in maintaining that AAA bond rating as well. So I'd like to bring a couple of those, be able to maybe publicize, if you will, the office and the responsibility that we have as people in doing our own due diligence and keeping our own noses clean, if you will, as we struggle with, inflation and investing and all that, because the people do play a role in that.
All right, thank you, Susan, for being with us. And our last one will be Seth.
Thank you, Larry, and also thank you to all the candidates and everybody who's involved here. I think it's great. This is my first time being a candidate, and I've really enjoyed the experience to get to know everybody and to get to hear all these ideas. As I look at this, I look at the responsibilities and the duties of the Treasurer, I come down on the investment side as having prime importance. And I think it was Fred Cox on the State Central Committee Facebook page that posed a question about what levels we should be funding the Utah retirement system at. And there was some responses there that I thought were good responses. And I'm just going to relate a little bit about my response on that to illustrate the importance of good investing and good oversight. In 2008, we went through the financial crisis. I think we all remember it. It was pretty dramatic just in terms of the market fall. And what happened in Utah was the pension almost overnight dropped 22%, the pension fund. And that blew a big hole in our pension, even though Utah for many, many, many years had made every payment required by the actuarial estimates. And not saying that you would have the foresight to avoid it, but if you have incrementally better management where you can save a little, that helps in terms of how much money the legislature and the states have to put back into it. And eventually, Dan Lilliquist, they went through and they changed the whole pension system around from a defined contribution to a defined, from a defined benefit plan to a defined contribution. So going forward, we wouldn't have the liability. But we still have a huge portion of defined contribution in the non-contributory system. And so the better that money is invested, the less liability we have for taxpayers that the legislature has to come up with. And that's the same with the SIP flow, the trust fund runs money, and that's the same with the other funds. The better we invest that, the better we manage, the less liability taxpayers are going to have. And given the risks that we have over the next 2 or 3 years, just in terms of inflation, evolving technology, global realignment as we start to move away from China, I think those things are going to be important. Being able to manage things in a modern way is going to be important. And I think the treasurer should have that type of experience. And that's where I do think I have strong experience. I've dealt with financial complexity with large clients, with small clients, global clients. And I think I can bring that expertise to the treasurer office to make sure that Utah taxpayers get what they need and we don't put the liability on the people.
All right, thank you, Seth, for being with us, all of the candidates, everyone who participated tonight. That will wrap it up. We did record both sessions. We'll try to get them posted as soon as we can tomorrow. They'll be on our Platform PAC Facebook page. And also, I think we're going to be able to text a link out to all the State Central Committee members. So thanks, everyone. And for the candidates in the Central Committee, we'll see you Saturday morning. Have a good night, everyone. Bye-bye.